Welcome in, my friends. It is time. I cannot believe it is already here. The finale of season 5 of the Cannabis Conversations podcast. Look, it has been a ton of fun this season. We've been talking to a lot of smart people. If you missed last week's episode, go check it out. It was a great time. D is one of those guys from a marketing perspective. Listening to him talk is super, super fun. But today's guest, if you don't know him, you must live under a fucking rock. But by the time we're done today, you will know him and you'll be able to go follow him and see all the crazy, beautiful things that we all get to see on a daily basis. Speaking of beautiful, it's beautiful to have a sponsor. We thank our friends at Hephaestus House of Automation. Thank you so much for your sponsorship this season. It is the only way these shows happen is with that of our sponsors. The Aura X delivers precision-packed pre-rolls at about 2,000 an hour with one operator. If that interests you, and I'm sure it does if you're in the pre-roll business, head over to Hephaestus, HEFESTUS-tech.com to learn more. Thank you so much for everything you do for the industry and for our little show here. All right, if you don't know Seth, you're gonna. Seth, my man, what's going on?
How you doing, man? I think I'm bringing down the guest quality by attending. But
no, this is impossible because again, you're one of I don't know that it's happened yet. You might be the only returning guest to the show. I don't know that. Yeah. I mean, right? Get the highlight out. Editing team, do something fun with that for God's sake.
Don't worry.
You know what I mean? This is. I think it's the case. So either way, man, we had you back on season 1. You're someone I've been watching for a long time. I love what you do. So we're going to have fun with today's show. And I'm really interested, as I'm sure many people are. Seth, today, right now, this show goes live beginning of April. What's on your mind, man?
It's interesting. I've been listening to your podcast. You have a lot of people that I think are really interesting. So, just getting my daily from you, going back, a couple weeks and listening to Luna and, talking to Michael Peterson, who's somebody who I've got a relationship with and supporting, and Notal and, Darren Gleeman, I think you had on, and Scott Basterlake. So just, getting a real good view of Angela and Sabo, getting a real good view of what's going on, just listening to you. I think my view is a little bit different than other people's. So I'm definitely waiting to see what happens with Schedule 3 and to see how that manifests. I can't pretend to understand how that's going to work or what's going to occur there. But I think once that, flag drops and it's going to happen, things are going to change positively and negatively. And I think there's opportunities to do some stuff. Along that same vein, I'm looking at the Farm Bill and waiting because I don't know what the hell's going to happen there. So that's one, legislation is one area that I'm definitely keeping an eye to the ground on, and we can talk about that, or I could, talk about 2 or 3 other things I'm looking at. But that's one area I think is critical.
I think the legislative part's interesting. I live in a prohibition state. Anyone who watches the show knows that. And so, Farm Bill is a big deal around here conversationally. What will happen, how it will act, will people lose their businesses? And again, I've always understood the argument for the hemp thing in Wisconsin having, what people refer to as dispensaries, maybe not. But the only problem I've ever had with the whole hemp versus cannabis thing, for me personally, is just from a business perspective, Seth, is that the people in recreational cannabis who've done it the right way have had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it the right way. And so when I see a state like Wisconsin just allow people to open dispensaries, at a corner store inside their gas station and sell THCA or whatever derivative or Delta 9, whatever, that's what bothers me. Am I in a minority there with that, Seth, or is that part of everyone's problem with the Farm Bill part?
If you're in the hemp business, you're sure not having that opinion. So, here's the way that I look at it. I just look at it. I'm not a legacy cannabis person. I never served time for cannabis. So automatically I'm a corporate person, right?
Yeah.
And what I tend to do is I just tend to look at the models that I think are going to make money, and I think hemp opened my eyes, specifically in the beverage sector. I mean, I don't think anybody was more bullish on beverages in 2025 than me. And what it came down to, honestly, was that for me, you still have cannabis in a stigmatized distribution modality. If you want to get weed, you got to go to an area where they're going to let you do it. Usually it's in a shitty part of town. It's not right on Main Street. Right? So the process of getting cannabis is still at least stigmatized. And when you put that product right in front of the consumer, right on Main Street, right in a Republican state, in a grocery store in Iowa, they consume the shit out of the molecule. Right. So like what opened my eyes to it was like everyone's waxing about these Chardonnay moms for years. Well, guess what? When you let the Chardonnay moms obtain the product in the context of their normal orbit of shopping, Target, grocery store, Kung Fu, ballet, whatever, they chose the molecule. Yeah. To your point, I don't think that's fair to the operators who have gone on a state-by-state basis and spent hundreds of millions of dollars to create a hegemony. I also don't know that what was intended by the Farm Bill occurred, right? I don't know if that was an intended consequence. I don't think there's an easy way to put the genie back in the bottle. I look at it differently, right? Which is that you had a huge uplift in hemp beverage. You had a bunch of companies that scaled and raised money. You're looking at a cliff, and either that cliff is going to get pushed out by a couple of years, that cliff is going to become a cliff, or that cliff's going to get solved into a plateau. And I don't know which way that's going to go. And from an investor or a capital allocation perspective, it's hard for me to underwrite on hope.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy. That is for sure. And again, I want to circle back to a couple of things you talked about here. So the Chardonnay mom, I think you're absolutely right. And I see it every single day here in Wisconsin because it's in the grocery stores, right? These hemp beverages, everything is everywhere, and it's obvious. And now they go out of their way to sort of section it off and put up signage, right? And so like grocery stores get it, and that's when I walk through those aisles. The idea that you're seeing 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, that's not what's happening there. Those are adult people who are turning labels, looking around, reading, educating, whatever. So yeah, man, that part's hard. Putting it back in the bottle is impossible. And I don't think it's fair, but as you know better than most, fair has very little to do with business.
Life ain't fair. Life ain't fair. Some people get born to families that have trust funds, and some people get born to families that have juvenile birth defects. Like I can't tell you why that happens.
It's life,
but it's life. But in terms of what I'm looking at, obviously legislation's a big deal, both on the cannabis and the hemp side, because either way, any of those toggle, it creates a lot of opportunity. Just going back to cannabis, there's this whole discussion, that Trump is going to make CBD reimbursable by Medicare or Medicaid. And, that's one of those situations where, like, could you find a less efficacious product to start out with? Like, okay, CBD probably has a lot of benefits, but I think we all realize that molecule in and of itself isn't the wonder drug. And is there an opportunity, if that occurs, to create a lane? I started in the pharmaceutical side of the business. I'm looking at a couple of pharmaceutical companies that have like a patented formulation of CBD that they're out selling. And I'm like, well, shit, if you could get that product reimbursed and get doctors to prescribe it, like there's a market there, so I do think you're going to see things happen there. I know there's people, like Glass House that are looking to figure out ways to capitalize on the production of legal hemp, the production of legal CBD, potentially the production of legal export flower in the cannabis market. So there's a lot of different micro analysis that go on to just those two. So legislation's probably number one on my watch list in terms of things I'm looking at. There's a couple more things, but that's definitely right at the top.
The pharma part's very interesting, right? When you start getting into CBD, and I know that's your background in the biotech world, and that's why when I hear you talk about that stuff and I start having you be interested in looking at that, it piques my interest, because ultimately, everyone, again, you not being a legacy guy, me being, I have never served time, but still kind of a legacy guy. The point is that at the end of the day, business is business, and that's what you focus on. And recently, you've been talking about not just revenue, okay? That's a fine number, but what's the profitability? What is making this thing go round? What's kind of turned you onto that recently? I know it's always been in your forefront, but recently I've seen you sort of up that message a little bit more from an investor standpoint. And I'm sure it's to educate investors, but are you just tired of the revenue spiel and want to get further into it? What's the background there, man?
I think it's a confluence of things, and it comes up to like merging two of the things that I'm watching together, right? One of the things that I'm watching is the cost of capital for majors, because during 23 and 24 we talked about this debt wall that was coming, right? You remember that? And that debt wall has pretty largely been scaled at historically low rates for the industry. So, the first thing that I'm kind of looking at is that the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is widening. And it's probably because they have more either adjusted or actual cash flow than others, right? So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is that I've espoused to you and others that there are very clearly 5 to 6 global models in cannabis that function. And when I say function, I mean spit off actual cash flow. And what you've seen in the preponderance of markets is that that's usually, either a well-run retail, a very well-run cultivation, a well-run MSO, or a very well-run brand that has gone multi-state. So one of the things that you have seen during 2026 is the emergence of the first super brand or platform company in the congruence of wild and grown edibles. So I do, and that's a cash flow based transaction. Those are two extremely profitable companies that came together to create an even more profitable company and a more efficient company. And I think the emergence of that super brand is kind of a third thing I'm watching. I'm convinced that there will be 1 or 2 more of those occur during 2026. So to answer your question, my focus on cash flow has been watching the majors worry about refinancing and then come in and refinance at kind of some of the best rates you've seen in the industry in ever almost. And the emergence of a traditional platform in any other industry that's based upon cash flow aggregation. And I think there's going to be more of those occur. So the people that seem to have the capability to generate cash flow are generating more cash flow. And the people that are earlier or don't are just becoming more and more difficult to operate and more disenfranchised.
Yeah, the super brand thing is super interesting to watch, and the way that you talked about it with this idea of a merger, right? These key we're already good. You're already good. If we come together, I mean, geez, what could we all be is great. You've also been noting a lot that because we all live here, well, a lot of us do, we focus on this market, but you've been looking a little bit more across the pond recently, and you have some real thoughts on the European market. How much of the European market is influenced by the players in the US as far as you can tell, Seth?
Well, let's go back to what I'm watching. I'm watching catalysts. We talked about catalyst markets for years. There's not a lot of catalysts left in the United States, right? Markets that have gone from 0 to 500,000 users. So the catalysts for me are markets that are now outside of the United States. So one of the reasons that I'm looking outside of the United States is you got 500,000 patients in Australia. It's $1 billion market. I don't know how many patients you have in Germany, but it's growing like crazy. You're going to have 500,000 patients come online in France pretty soon. The UK is turning on. So for me, I look at where growth can come, and it seems to me that non-US, non-North American markets are where you're going to see real growth in the next 2 to 5 years. And I think that's been substantiated by a couple of recent acquisitions and the numbers that are coming out of Germany. To your question, though, I'm not sure that my statistic is right, but a vast majority of European product is being exported from Canada into Europe. I want to say it's 80%. I could be wrong.
Wow.
I just saw a post on that. So I do, or a data point on that I could probably pull up. But to your point, I think the supply chain for a lot of those markets is largely being driven by North America, usually LP exports. And that's something I'm watching. I don't know how much longer that can stay. It can stay from a price perspective, but given how weird the world is, I could very easily see someone in the EU standing up and saying, should we import 80% of our weed from Canada, or should we import a max cap of our weed from Canada? So I don't know, but it gets into, your question gets into what I'm looking at. I'm looking at catalysts, and European is, another million. Europe and Australia are another million patients that you're not getting to in the US, and that's a big number. So I'm looking at it that way. I also look at a lot of states, but to your point on international, it's why I'm looking at it.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, look, you look at, again, just considering Australia and Germany as their own million people, the rest of Europe coming on board. I mean, there's going to be huge numbers. And again, if it only puts itself around a medical side to start with, or in Germany, it's full recreational, I believe. Different game, right? Things become crazy in that way. Let's bring it back stateside then, because I am interested. We've got some new states coming on. I live next to one here in Minnesota that's been, I think, largely a debacle by most standards. What are you watching internally here? What states have piqued your interest?
I spend a lot of time in Missouri, so I obviously look at Missouri a lot. California is definitely a state that I look at. Maryland and New York are two states that I definitely look at. Florida and Ohio, Arizona, Massachusetts. So those are usually the ones on my board. I share with people some kind of retweeted, information where we look at like the top 15 markets, every week. So I'm looking at them, for different reasons. But those are several that are on my radar screen. I don't look at Illinois as much, just because it seems to be kind of MSO dominated and pretty heavy to get into. I haven't really looked at Virginia or Kentucky too hard, just because they're new and they seem to be limited. I've definitely spent some time looking at what's going on in Nebraska. California is where my bread and butter is. So I do spend a lot of time looking at the dynamics in this market and seeing what's happening. And I think, you've seen kind of a California resurgence, which is nice. Top line's been hit, but I think you're seeing more people actually make it. So that's a smattering of where I look. I'm on the board of an Australia public company. They're pretty much the largest provider down there. So I definitely look at that market. I keep tabs on Canada, less than those others, but that's usually where I'm paying attention.
I love the Missouri thing. I've been keeping my eye on it myself, and I'm thinking about making a trip down there. So I'll have to get you offline and see where you recommend I go check out in general, not just cannabis, the state itself. I love my hiking. I love my outdoors, and
you should, man. It's a really beautiful state. I call it a perfectly imperfect cannabis market. You have 8-9 operators there that are really good, and you have 5 or 6 people in that state that can really grow good quality product and have world-class facilities. So it's been a real eye-opener to see what's going on down there.
Yeah, again, seems like a really cool state, and I'm definitely looking forward to getting down there. So I'll certainly hit you up with that when I do, for sure. All right, so what else? What else is on your mind, man? You've been anything else that we haven't covered you want to get to here?
Again, just to reboot it, what's going to happen at the federal level with hemp and cannabis, I think drives a lot of conversations the ability of the debt wall to get scaled at very low levels, I think separates larger from smaller operators and makes it more difficult for people that are starting to get a foothold. Catalysts nationally and internationally, and then kind of the emergence of what I think will be a super brand. I guess the other thing I'll say is that it seems like to date, when we're 75 days into 2026, there's probably been more positive accretive deal activity in the sector in these 75 days than there's probably been in the last 6 years. So I do think you're starting to see some trend where this concept of consolidation as opposed to just holding serve is starting to take root, and I think you're going to see more of that in time. There's a couple pieces on the board that seem to be pretty interesting, and people are certainly out there trying. I mean, I'm in a lot of really interesting conversations. How many of them close, we'll see, but it's definitely the S3 shot in the arm and the ability for larger companies to refinance or take on more capital at lower rates has really kind of driven conversations that weren't existent 12 to 15 months ago.
I mean, look, that's why we ask you what you're thinking, man. You've got all the thoughts. You cover a lot of different markets. You're always looking at a lot of different things. It's really, really why I appreciate you making the time to come on. So we're going to wrap the show up with what we call the hot hits, man. I know you've been great with your time, so I will make it quick. You already sort of touched on it, but I say reschedule. You say what?
Show me the money.
It's a fair way to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, Hot Hits is brought to us by Hephaestus House of Automation. If you'd like to learn how to make, 2,000 joints an hour and have them be clean, pre-packed, ready to rock and roll for you, head over to hephaestus-tech.com to learn more. Next question here on the Hot Hits is going to be, Seth, what do you think is going to be the hottest vertical in 26?
Wow. Probably Europe. Honestly, I think you saw a deal happen there a couple of weeks ago. I think you might see some fast followers given the growth there. I think you'll see another one. International in general, I think will be hot.
International in general, love it. You talked about it a little bit with the super brand. Do you see any other big deals, any other rumors running around that interest you and think, wow, if that happened, that'd be pretty cool?
I do. I'm deep in the veil of confidentiality on a few of them, so I can't disclose, but suffice it to say that if I'm going to prognosticate, I do believe that there will be the emergence of another brand consolidation play or two during 2026, like we saw with Gruen and Wild.
It makes total sense to me. You talked about your retweets of top markets. As it sits right now, what are the 3 top markets that you look at that are by whatever your basis is? What are the top 3 and in what order?
Let me go to the data and answer that with actual, quantitation. So,
and Seth, who do we use for the data?
I use a variety of different people. This is a report that's put out by my good friends at SSC Advisors and very smart M&A people that are given some data in a weekly report that they generate from Hoodie. So this is a combination of SSC Advisors and US Macro Hoodie Analytics. I think by revenue on a trailing 12-month basis, January 26 annualized, according to Hoodie, the largest markets are California, Michigan, Florida, New York, and Massachusetts by sales. Missouri is a very close second. So, when I go down that list of the top 15, it's California, Michigan, Florida. I don't look at Michigan and Florida as much. I look at New York and Massachusetts, Missouri, then Illinois, Colorado, which we should put a pin in and come back to. New Jersey, I look at a lot. Maryland, I look at a lot. Ohio, not as much. Then Arizona, Connecticut, and Virginia. I really don't look at Connecticut and Virginia. Colorado's interesting. If we go back to something I've been thinking about, I ain't kind of written that market off. There just doesn't seem like there's a lot of growth there, and it's been largely saturated. If you look at the deal activity there in the last 75 days, there are 3 transactions that have occurred where people have gone deep into buying dispensaries there. Vireo did 2 deals basically to buy a set of dispensaries from one company and then a set of dispensaries basically from Ease. And then another group of financial guys bought like a 17 store chain there. So that certainly like made me be like, maybe like there's something there that I'm not seeing. So Colorado has kind of caught my eye recently. I don't know that there's anything actionable there, but I just do think it's interesting that a market that I've kind of long thought was just topped out has pretty significant deal activity in the last couple months, weeks.
Yeah, we had earlier this season, we had Matt Schifrin from Pioneer Interest in Colorado on vertical integration outfit out there. And he was talking about how things that hit, the bottom line, like revenue and everything had dropped from a state perspective, like 43% or whatever it was. I'm looking at my notes here, 43.6. And so he was like, holy shit, what are we going to do here? But he said it helped people understand how to get lean, how to get right. And, for good operators, you can run through it. So I'm an old school Colorado guy. I grew up in the medical scene there, really cutting my teeth, growing and helping dispensaries, et cetera. This was 2005, 2006. So about 20 years ago. Being the first to the market in the legal state game, I think you're right. I think a lot of people have written it off. So it's very interesting now that it might be back on your radar. Sounds like everyone else would probably put it on theirs too if it's on yours.
Maybe. I mean, again, like it's just one of those things where, I don't know. You collect baseball cards or something, and all of a sudden, some baseball card you never thought was worth anything goes for like $200. You're like, maybe I should check that out. So it's more like that, I think.
That's a great point, man. That's a great point. All right. So my last question for you is more kind of on the outside of it. How the hell did we end up getting unions in cannabis, Seth? I mean, tell me, man. I saw your article, and look, when the boys show up, the unions don't fool around. So just leave us with the union thought here.
I'd like to talk about one more thing after that, but that's okay.
Okay.
I think unions have been around in cannabis since inception. They're just beginning to get a foothold. There's 2 or 3 of them that have been around in California for a while. UFCW, I think, is one, and Teamsters, and there's a third. I don't know who they are. Look, when you have more than 1,000 employees and you're a couple $100 million revenue company and you're in manufacturing, they're going to show up. I think the union question is interesting because of 2 reasons. One is that I don't have anything. I'm not pro-union. I'm not anti-union in any way. I just think it's really hard when you have an industry that's struggling to be profitable and get a foothold for a labor union to come in and demand, wages for a worker. Now, for the worker, like that's the right thing to do, but it's not like we're in, chicken processing facilities in like the middle of nowhere, Kansas, where like people are cutting fingers off. Although, maybe given some of the things that we've seen in our industry, it's not the safest work environment, to be in cultivation or processing. So it's dichotomous for me because like, again, I don't have an anti-union grudge. They've been around for a while, and it's just tough to see how that intermixes. Now, where I think it gets really interesting is with the Teamsters, and I'll tell you why. The Teamsters have more money than anybody, man. They control in excess of 10 billion at least in pension fund capital, and pretty much 25 to 30% of any product that's a beverage, or in a beverage cooler that shows up in a liquor store or a convenience store or a grocery store around the United States is moved by Teamster wheels, and 1 in 10 workers in the United States is a Teamster. So, like, if someone wants to effectuate change, the Teamsters have more money and more power than the entire industry, right? Like, than the entire industry. So I do think it's interesting when they show up, because I see them as having the capacity to figure out a way to kind of create a unified agenda and put money into it. And I know they have been discussing that and talking about it and trying to figure out ways to do that. It hasn't manifest. The most recent thing that I saw was, hey man, the Teamsters are going to be the Teamsters. They unionized the shop. That shop went on strike. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Right. So it's just interesting to see that eventuality, but they've been around for a while.
That's interesting. See, not something I knew about. Again, growing up in the Midwest, knew all about them. Grew up around them more and more. A lot of family in them. So totally have understanding. Not a pro-union guy, not an anti-union guy either myself. I love the idea of consumer protection, but I don't love the idea someone keeps their job even if they suck at it. So I have a whole problem with the whole thing. But ultimately, I think it's good for the people. You're going to give us a bonus thought. What's the bonus thought from Seth on what he's thinking about?
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about LinkedIn anymore, but I will say I just want to give everyone a giant thank you for anyone who supports me there. Whatever occurs there, I don't even understand it anymore. It seems like there's about 500 robots that just want to comment on my stuff every day. And, to all the people who come up to me and thank me for sharing, I really appreciate that. And to the people who don't like it, just unfollow me, man. I'm not, I'm not a guru. I didn't anoint myself as anything. No one gave me an award. I'm not trying to profess that I'm the smartest person in the world. I have ADD. And I write every day, and me posting on LinkedIn has become therapeutic. And, there's a lot of people that, to be quite honest with you, Sean, are either threatened or offended or, just don't like it. And I've definitely dialed back my rhetoric. I've become, I think, a little bit less controversial. I'm not clearly taking hard shots at people anymore. But man, it's been an interesting experience, and I'm just going to tell you, if you don't like what I'm saying or you think it's stupid, just don't go look at it. It's that simple. And to those of you who love what I'm doing, I thank you. Please DM me. Please call. Please write. I got time for you. But man, it's be careful what you wish for, brother, because it's a crazy world out there, man.
So much of that is true, and I'm glad you took it here and said it here because as a finale episode, as a point of interest, I'll make it very clear to people that everyone who comes on this show is requested to come on this show by me. So people like Seth, people in the industry that you see, they're not begging to come on these shows, and that's not how it works. I like to go and find good people who bring information, but I've heard some of the same things about, oh, well, you only talk to so-and-so or you only do this. Look, it's the internet, man. If you don't like the content, go find it elsewhere. Go be somewhere else. And I get it. Everyone has their opinions, but we're just out here trying to share ideas and share concepts around business, around cannabis. And frankly, Seth just said it, but it's therapeutic for some of us to come out here and do it. It's why I do this show. This show isn't some profit game for me, man. This is time spent, with good people learning. So it should be about for all of us. So yeah, Seth, dude, keep doing what you're doing. I love it. We appreciate it. Speaking of appreciation, you guessed it. I appreciate my friends at the House of Automation, Hephaestus. Thank you guys so much this year for your sponsorship. It has been unbelievable. We capped off a great season with an even better closer than I could have hoped for. And so if you're looking for the best product in market, head over to hephaestus-tech.com and check out the Aura X. This machine can produce 2,000 joints an hour. My hand hurt thinking about producing 5 joints an hour. So if you're in that business, head over to hephaestus-tech.com. Seth, thank you so much, man, for closing out the season. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all you do every day to bring us the information you do.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, remember, it is the goal of this show always to remove the stigma and uplift the plant. Please do your part in helping us with that and have yourselves a great week. And we hope to see you again for a season 6. But remember, sponsor is the only way we can make that happen. So if you know a friend who wants to sponsor, have them hit me up. Thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy it. And we appreciate the love this season.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, man.